Today is August 21st edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were Central Illinois agriculture source, and in the Midwest alongside in Central Illinois agriculture, we're glad you're here on Back Roads of Illinois. I am glad to join with you guys on a Wednesday because it's hump day. It's almost Friday. This time is for serious business for your agricultural news and markets, especially with the interviews with John Baranick for DTN and a friend of the show with Chip Nellinger on today's show. Otherwise, we were talking with John Heinberg from Total Farm Marketing for today's show. DNC in Chicago, top yield in Iowa and Minnesota. The heat is coming back again. The Democrats' National Convention is in Chicago at the United Center for the convention. Illinois Corn Growers Association and Illinois Soybean Association is there at the convention for what's important to the agricultural sector in Illinois and across the country. The top yield is in Iowa and Minnesota. In Iowa is 209 bushel per acre. In Minnesota, it's in 203 bushel per acre. Soybean yield in South Dakota is lower than Iowa and Minnesota. South Dakota has been impacting with the weather in the state. The heat is coming back again. The heat is going to be back in the Midwest for next week, but the Labor Day will be cooler. We were talking about the weather with John Baranick. Stay tuned on Back Roads of Illinois. We're excited about our guest today on Back Roads of Illinois with us. We were joining with John Baranick for DTN. He's a meteorologist for DT, and welcome to the show with us on today. How are you today?
Doing very well, Cesar. I hope you are too. I'm up in Minnesota, and we've actually got some sunshine out there right now, which is kind of unusual for us. We've been pretty wet up here and very cloudy, but it's absolutely fantastic weather over the last couple of weeks. I've been able to turn off my air conditioner and open up the windows. It's been absolutely fantastic. So I'm enjoying it. I'm having a good time, and we're getting to that point of the season where things are starting to come together and wrap up, and it kind of concludes or we kind of get into a little bit busier of a time period here as we start talking about South American weather. I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But as things wind down here in the U.S., it gets a little bit less stressful for me, even though it gets a lot more stressful for farmers out there.
Let's start with our conversation about updating on the weather in the Midwest with these crop private tour.
Yeah, I think, for the most part, we're all in that guessing phase of yields right now. Whether you look at the USDA, you look at the Pro Farmer Tour, even DTN has their own forecasts out that you can look at for free at dtnpf.com. But we're all kind of in that guessing mode right now, but they're all pretty high, honestly. Some may be higher than others and in different states and different areas, but it's just really due to an overall really good weather we've had over the course of this season. It hasn't been without its challenges, right, Cesar? I mean, we've had things go on from time to time, severe weather. We've had some stretches of heat and dryness. We've had some flooding areas up here, especially where I'm at in Minnesota. But if you look at everything on as an aggregate on the whole, weather conditions here were pretty darn good this summer. And considering we were expecting to go into La Nina conditions here this summer, where we might get one of those really long stretches of heat and dryness, we just haven't done that. We've had, just like I said, kind of more small stretches, unless you're in Texas. That's where the heat's really been. And today we might hit 110 degrees down there. And that's kind of where the heat's been sitting. We've been able to, follow up some of these really long stretches, or not long, but these stretches of hot and dry weather with some periods of active weather and some cooler conditions. So overall, I mean, you look at the Corn Belt as a whole, the Midwest as a whole, Illinois in particular, and everything just looks really, really good. Like I said, there's just a few spots there that have had some issues. And Ohio's been on the drier side. They got drier in June and haven't really recovered. The wet conditions that came in June for the upper Midwest around here, like I mentioned, for Minnesota, also southeast South Dakota and northwest Iowa, really most of northern Iowa. But outside of those and those were impactful, right? I mean, they're going to have some impacts on our yields and our overall conditions, and I'm sure producers in those areas are not happy with what's going on at the moment. But if you look at everything as a whole, the weather conditions have been very, very generous. When we usually see some areas, poking up with a lot of drought, we just don't have that this year. It's just it's been a good enough rainfall for most areas, and in some cases a little too much. But overall, like I said, pretty good weather conditions this year.
How is the weather conditions in the West like?
Sorry, do you mean the Western U.S.? Pretty bad conditions overall. They didn't get a whole lot of rainfall outside of far southern Brazil this winter. So, I mean, if you look at maps of soil moisture across South America, it's very dry. Just about everywhere in Argentina and almost all of Brazil. Now, central Brazil doesn't have seasons like we do here. They're so close to the equator that they just have a wet season and a dry season, and they're in their dry season, and so it doesn't rain very often, and rarely at all does it ever rain in central Brazil. But they ended their wet season very early last year, and it got very hot over the summer. Their daytime temperatures were in the 90s every day. So their soil moisture is basically gone. They don't have any. They have to wait for those wet season rains to return. Usually that's in late September. And that's when they start planting there in central Brazil. Is when those rains start coming back. Sometimes they can get a rain or two coming from a front coming up from Argentina to kind of moisten the soils a bit. But it's really those consistent wet season rains that start in September but really build throughout October that they really rely upon. What's interesting now is that with this developing La Nina, sometimes those wet season rains are pushed back, a week or even longer. And we saw that on a couple of occasions with the previous couple of La Ninas here. So that will be a concern, because if they can't plant on time, they can't get to their second crop. So if listeners here aren't familiar, the weather conditions in Brazil are close enough that they can put out a double crop and get some poor weather again. So that's where our focus is going to need to be here from now on, and really for the next several months. We won't really be locking in what we think is going to happen with their crops down there until we kind of turn the calendar into 2025, when we get a good idea of how everything was planted, how weather went through the first half of the season, and then we just kind of coast from there. So it's gotta stay focused on South America, especially if you're trying to sell grain here in the U.S.
Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I mean we've had some really good weather here in the U.S. This summer. It's been very nice, but there are still some questions. They may be minor, and it may be localized to your farm, but there are still some issues out there. Did we get enough rain at the right time? I mean, everything looks good, but did it come at the right time? And there were some areas around there where pollination would have been a little suspect. Did we have some severe weather that came through and didn't look like it made some damage, but did it occur anyway? I mean, we had all kinds of severe weather events go on this year, much more than we typically see. So will that have any impact? And then how does this last bit go? Because we're not quite done yet, and we still have some weather to get through. And it's kind of sketchy here a little bit. It's not as consistent as we saw over the summer with the rains. It's coming a little bit less frequently now, and so is that going to make a difference? So we still have some questions out there. We're not setting something in stone just yet, but just like I said, you got to keep your eyes on South America, on everything going on there, and everything going on in the Pacific, because that's the biggest driver of our weather here in the Americas is what's going on in the Pacific Ocean. So we'll keep our eyes on that too.
Thanks, John.
Absolutely, Caesar. Thanks for having me on. Good talk to you.
This is John Baranick for DT, and welcome back to the show with us on back roads of Illinois. We were joining with a good friend of the show, Chip Nellinger from Blue Reef Agri Marketing. How are you been, Chip?
Good to be here, Caesar.
Let's start with our conversation about the yields for the Pro Farmer Crop Tour for right now.
Yeah, Pro Farmer is ongoing about midway through their annual crop tour. Of course, the market is hanging on every tweet and social media post from participants of that tour, and they're comparing and trying to get an assessment of whether the crop that's out in the field is going to match what the USDA August crop report said there at 183 plus national average corn yield, and I think it was 53.2 on the beans. And so 2 days ago, they started on the, each leg, started in Ohio on the eastern leg and South Dakota on the western leg. And those two states came in respectable, but really not any better than a year ago on either the yields, corn yields or pod counts. They moved into Indiana and then Nebraska. Those yields did improve a little bit, but still a little bit of a question in the market's mind as to whether they were big enough corn yields and big enough pod counts to justify the USDA. They've moved now into Iowa and Illinois. They're making their way through Illinois. I think this evening, I think they have their meeting in Bloomington, Illinois, if I'm not mistaken, and they come out with their state estimate for Illinois. So that'll be very closely watched because the USDA had Illinois at 225 bushels, by far a new state record. So far, some of the reports from the road and during the day out of the participants in Illinois is a lot of variability, almost 100 bushel swing from low to high in some of these yield estimates on corn. So, it may be putting a little bit of a question in the market's mind, but Friday afternoon, after the market closes, Pro Farm will come out with their final estimates, and that will be very closely scrutinized by the market. Again, comparing what Pro Farmer said historically with, how each state comes in with the variance versus what the USDA has, to see if they believe right now that we do have these record yields on corn and beans. So they're good crops. Don't get me wrong. This is not a disaster by any stretch, but a lot of variability they're finding. And the question remains, can we hit and achieve that high bar that the USDA has set for us on this August crop? A lot of people that bought up this year, private products or like margin protection insurance, and which gave you a 90 up to 95% coverage level. And so if you did do that, even with higher yields, we may be into a situation where the crop insurance is starting to kick in at these low prices. So there's a lot of moving parts. Every operation is going to be a little bit different. But for the time being, I can tell you it does appear that, we've kind of found some stability and some equilibrium here. And we are seeing that demand pick up, which is a really good sign and something that we need to put a bottom in.
Do you have some concerns about recession in the agricultural or commodity prices until November?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, that's something that's going to be, a massive event that the market, not only the grain markets, but the financial markets have to deal with, is this election. Obviously some very different philosophies from both sides of the aisle here, and it's certainly going to affect the economy. And these lower prices and commodities are undoubtedly going to affect the ag economy. So that is something that certainly is going to be something we're going to have to deal with, not only at the election coming up here, which is less than 3 months away. It's only about 2.5 months away, I believe. Um, but longer term, is this recession slipping into, or is this economy slipping into a recession? And the movement of the dollar and interest rates is certainly going to be something that's front and center in the agricultural market. So that will have an impact. At times, maybe as big an impact as what the actual yields end up being. So it's going to be something that's very closely watched by the market. Not only the results of the election, but what do interest rates do? What's the Federal Reserve do in this September meeting that they have coming up here about a month from now? Do they lower interest rates? A lot of unemployment and economic reports coming out in the next couple of months that are important as well. So it'll be volatile out there. We've seen some stability in the stock market bounce back, but it's certainly something that could affect our grain and livestock markets going forward to a big extent.
Yes, it will be interesting for this election season in the country.
It sure will. I can't say I'm really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it being over. And there could be a lot of volatility here in late October, early November, depending on what it looks like the results will be from that election. And it could be a lot of market volatility surrounding that.
Do you have any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. As easy as it is to do right now, I don't think it's time to put the markets to the backside, the back burner, and not pay attention to them. It's easy to do that on the lows, and we've got harvest getting ready to start, and a lot of stuff that's urgent. But the markets still are very, very important. So don't forget about them. There's going to be opportunities, I believe. There's carry in the market. There's a lot of decisions from a basis standpoint, crop insurance standpoint, like I talked about earlier. So now is not the time to put the markets and risk management decisions to the back burner, even as you get busy, as hard as that is to do. So stay informed and stay on top of the markets and keep them front and center, because there could be some opportunities in the next 60 days here to make some risk management decisions, not only on this crop, but the 25 crop as well.
Where people can find you for their risk management consulting services.
Yeah, you can find us on the internet. We are at www.bluereefinc.com. A lot of information there. You can also just call us, excuse me, at the office. Our office in Morton, the number is 309-550-7213. And there'll always be somebody to pick up that line and talk to you about what you're doing on your risk management plan and how you might be able to improve the plan and the implementation of that plan. So don't hesitate to pick the phone up, and we'd love to chat with you.
Thanks, Chip.
Thanks, Cesar. I always love being on. Thank you.
This is Chip Neliliniger from Blue Reef Agri Marketing, One Back Roads of Illinois. We are back with our guest on every Wednesday afternoon on Back Roads of Illinois with John Heinberg from Total Farm Marketing for today's show. I heard about the Packers. They were looking lost.
It wasn't a rough week. It was a rough week, but it's preseason, and when they play backups versus starters, that's why they're backups. So not getting cranked up yet about anything until we get to the regular season. So coming soon.
Let's start with our conversation about the grain market for today's close.
Yeah, pretty quiet day, especially in the corn market today, at least corn and soybeans. I will touch on wheat a little bit separately here. But corn, real quiet trading range, 4 cents total from top to bottom, just kind of grinding right now. And really, the same thing with soybeans. We're just kind of looking for news. We're in that window, we got pro farmer numbers, we're moving old crop supplies, and we just don't really have anything to give us some direction. And because of that, the market just isn't going anywhere, at least at this time frame. So we'll get some export sales numbers tomorrow. We'll see how those are going. Yeah, I do like the fact we've seen some export business kind of pop up here for soybeans this last week, as China as well as others have been in the soybean market. Only thing wrong with those sales, we'll take the business. I'm not complaining, but they're not big. They're just very routine, and it's seasonal. So we expect those to be here. Now we need to see some bigger numbers, and then I get a little more excited about the soybean side. And that's probably the reason the market hasn't moved a whole lot off of those sales announcements the last handful of days. Biggest one today was the wheat market. Disappointing close there. September Chicago wheat new contract low close today with its trade down to 519. Again, we got harvest pressure going on between the spring wheat up north as well as the SRW crops starting to get harvested. And then we just got to go look at the fact U.S. wheat is still expensive globally, and we got to keep things, in check to try to get that extra demand that this market keeps counting on. So that makes things difficult. So we'll have to watch the trend in the wheat market. That does spill over and, work on the corn market a little bit as well as we go forward here. The thing we're really watching though in that wheat market, we've had some late rain and wetness in that spring wheat country. Not sure where the quality could be. I'm hearing some talk of some issues regarding that quality, and this market could be looking for some protein down the road, which could help support out, support that wheat market in the longer haul. Of the day, what is the trend? I stressed that earlier. If we're looking at Nebraska being 6-7% above last year's numbers, or Indiana being a handful percentage point above last year's numbers, you go look at what the USDA is forecasting. They're forecasting the same thing. Right now the crop tour, at least from what I can tell, is for the most part validating what the USDA is thinking, that there's a pretty good crop of corn and soybeans coming, or at least the potential's there as long as everything holds together into the harvest window.
Right. Be careful with social media.
Very much so, and don't let that make your marketing decisions. Because obviously in our modern world, because of social media, if one guy's got something going wrong, he's going to jump up and down and scream on social media so everybody can see it, and that's just going to be the minority, very much so, compared to guys that got things going very, very well. When you do marketing plans and think about marketing yourself, focus on just the big picture. Where are we at with supplies? What do I have to work with? The rest of it will work itself out, and that's where working with guys like myself come into play. We can find you different strategies around just the typical cash markets, so keep an eye on those things though. But again, don't let social media and what you see out there drive your opinion of what the quality of the crop can be.
Where people can find you for their risk management consulting services.
Sure, they can give me a call. Our phone number at the office, 800-334-9779. Shoot me an email, johnh@totalfarmmarketing.com. And that website of ours, totalfarmmarketing.com. It doesn't cost anything to reach out and ask a question or two. I'd just love to chat with you, find out your situation, and see what we can offer you.
Do you have any final thoughts about this growing season in Midwest?
Right now we're at the spot. We're just waiting for this crop to kind of finish out. Weather's pretty much on the back burner, especially for corn. Beans, we'll just kind of keep an eye on it if we do get some drier or hotter weather, which kind of staying in the forecast models, but nothing extreme. But that may be enough to, keep some support in the market if they don't think these beans are going to finish out. Right now for producers, stay active in what you're going to be doing this fall. Are you going to be putting bushels straight to the market from the combine? Are you going to be storing it? What do I have for the protection around there? What am I, keep an eye on the basis in front of you here, because I have a feeling we're going to have a pretty big, the word I've been using is quagmire, when we get all these bushels moving around here, that things can get full pretty fast, and that basis level could kind of fall apart. So if you're moving bushels this fall, make sure you look at some different ideas. don't be late to the cereal bowl, as I say. Just be aggressive on things now, and then you can always find a way to use strategies to re-own things or put floors underneath here. Because I'm still not 100% convinced our fall low is in, and I think we could see that as we move later into September as harvest starts to pick up.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome. Thank you much for a good day again today.
This is John Heinberg from Total Farm Marketing for today's show. This is your agricultural commodity markets update on back roads of Illinois. Corn futures finished in up 8 to 9 cents. Soybean futures finished in up 8 to 9 cents. Wheat futures finished in up 3 to 4 cents. Livestock market is looking like under pressure once again. We'll look here. Cattle finished in down 8 to 9 cents. Feeder cattle finished in down 8 to 7 cents. Lean hogs finished in down 7 to 4 cents. Crude oil finished in up 2 to 3 cents per barrel. Dow Jones finished in down. Thanks to John Baranick and Chip Neliliniger. John Heinberg. We're running out of time on our show, but you can listen to our show on YouTube and whenever you get your podcast. This been Back Roads of Illinois. I am Cesar Delgado. Have a good day.